Welcome back to the South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast by Ohio State fans for Ohio State fans from the West Coast. I'm your host, Zach Moore. Today is Sunday, May 31st, 2026, and thank you for joining me for what I think is my third annual look at the Ohio State football Buckeyes through the lenses of Athlon Sports in Lindy's college football preview magazines. I just picked copies of these magazines up, though this might be my fourth annual look at the Buckeyes through the lenses of these magazines. I'm not sure. The years are all starting to run together now. I guess that's what happens after the age of 50, and I'm well north of that at this point. Today, I'm going to talk about how both publications view the Ohio State roster and where the Buckeyes fall in the team rankings of both magazines. Let's start with the view from Athlon and Lindy's of the Ohio State roster, beginning with national unit rankings. Now, as we know, both magazines have a top 10 ranking for each unit on offense and defense. According to Athlon, the Buckeyes have the number 3 quarterback room in the country, with returning starter Julian Sayin, who led the country in completion percentage and was a Heisman finalist last season, as we know, and quarterback in waiting, Tavian St. Clair. Only Texas with Arch Manning and Oregon with Dante Moore are rated higher at quarterback than the Buckeyes, according to Athlon. Now, Lindy's does not have a separate top 10 for quarterbacks. They combine quarterbacks and running backs into a backfield ranking. And in that ranking, Lindy's also has a lot of respect for the Buckeyes. They have the Ohio State offensive backfield with Julian Sayin and Bo Jackson ranked number 3 behind Ole Miss and Miami. I've said several times on this pod, I was not among the fans that jumped off the Sayin bandwagon after a mildly disappointing postseason last year. I mean, as a redshirt freshman last season, Sayin threw for 3,610 passing yards, which was the 4th highest single-season passing yardage total in program history. I would not trade Julian Sayin for any of the other top quarterbacks in the country, and that's no disrespect to Arch Manning or Dante Moore or Trinidad Chambliss. I'm just good with my guy. I think Julian Sayin is going to have a monster 2026. And based on their rankings, Athlon and Lindy's agree. At running back, the Buckeyes land at number 8 in Athlon's top running back units. That's not too shabby. Now, I've already mentioned Lindy's backfield ranking for the Buckeyes of number 3, which includes running backs and quarterbacks. Right now, I think Athlon's ranking of number 8 is about where I'd rank a room that has a budding star in sophomore Bo Jackson, who ran for just under 1,100 yards as a true freshman, and another interesting player in fellow sophomore Isaiah West. Now, according to 24/7 Sports, West was only a 3-star prospect out of Philadelphia in the 2024 class, but I really liked what I saw in limited action from West last season. In 108 snaps, he ran for 310 yards on 59 carries at 5.3 yards per carry and 2 touchdowns. He finished 2025 with an excellent overall PFF grade of 76.5 and a grade of 76.1 in the run game. Bo Jackson's going to be RB1 for this team. I think West is likely to be RB2. Now, it's worth noting both backs missed spring practices due to minor procedures on their shoulders, but both are expected to be ready by the start of fall practices. The Buckeyes also added an interesting veteran back out of the transfer portal in Florida transfer Jacoby Jackson. Now, Jackson spent the first 3 seasons of his college career at Kahoma Community College in Mississippi before transferring to Florida in 2023, where he took a red shirt that season. He only played 292 snaps for the Gators between 2024 and 2025, but his 2025 season was cut short after only 4 games due to a shoulder injury. Now, in 2024, Jackson was pretty good in a reserve role for the Gators. He ran for 509 yards at 5.4 yards per carry and 7 rushing touchdowns. 2026 will be Jackson's 7th season of college football. So that begs the question, what is a guy in his mid-20s with 607 career rushing yards doing in Columbus? I think I know the answer. He's an excellent pass-blocking running back. In 4 games last season, he finished with a PFF pass blocking grade of 78.7. In 13 games in 2024, he finished with a pass blocking grade of 73.2. Now, Bo Jackson and Isaiah West both really struggled in pass protection last season. They both graded in the 40s according to PFF in that area. So I would expect to see a lot of Jacoby Jackson on passing downs against the better defensive fronts the Buckeyes are going to face this season, like Texas, Indiana, and Oregon. And at 5'10", 214 pounds, Jackson is also very likely the short yardage back for Carlos Loughlin this season. At receiver, the Buckeyes land at number 1 in the unit rankings of both of these magazines, and that, of course, is largely due to the brilliance of Jeremiah Smith, who, as I said last week, should be the program's career leader in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns by early October. And if you're a regular listener of this podcast, then you know I'm bullish on true freshman Chris Henry Jr., the 5-star prospect out of Santa Ana, California. Henry Jr. showed out in the spring game, and I think that meant something. Now, I know he's only a true freshman, but in my view, he's a no-brainer as wide receiver 2 for the Buckeye offense in 2026. Now, after Henry Jr., the Buckeyes have 3 players that, in my view, are all kind of cut from the same cloth as slot receivers. That's senior Brandon Inniss, senior Devin McCune, the UTSA transfer, and redshirt junior Kyle Parker, the LSU transfer. If there's a difference maker in that trio, I think it's likely McCune. He's far and away the most productive of the bunch. And in 3 seasons at UTSA, McCune had 152 catches for just under 1,700 yards and 16 touchdown catches. That's about 3 times what Brandon Inniss has produced over his 3 seasons as a Buckeye. Now, to be fair to Inniss, he's never been better than the 4th receiving option during his career at Ohio State, and he's seen much better defenses in the Big Ten than McCune did in the American Conference. And then there's Kyle Parker, who's been a reserve his entire college career. At 3 seasons in Baton Rouge, Parker had 385 receiving yards on 34 receptions and 5 touchdown catches. Look, I think wide receiver 3 comes down to McCune and Inniss, and my money's on McCune. He's just played a lot more football, and he also knows the pressure of being a number 1 receiver in his career. McCune was the top receiving target for UTSA last year, and he has 1,374 career snaps under his belt. That's more than 2 times the number of career snaps Inniss has at 671. And McCune's PFF grades are significantly higher. The last 2 seasons of McCune's overall and receiving grades, according to PFF, have been in the mid to high 70s, while Inniss's grades have been in the low to mid 60s. Look, I still think Inniss is going to be an impactful player, both as a receiver and on special teams for the Buckeyes this season, and his leadership as a team captain and Iron Buckeye will be invaluable. The Buckeyes aren't as loaded at receiver as they've been in recent years, but this is still a very good position group, and obviously Athlon and Lindy's agree if they have it at number 1 in the country. Both Athlon and Lindy's are high on the Ohio State offensive line this season. Athlon has that unit rated number 4 nationally. Lindy's has it at number 3. And I said this on last week's pod. I think the Buckeyes have 3 players from this unit that could blossom into stars this season. Left tackle Austin Sareveld, left guard Luke Montgomery, and center Carson Hinsman. They are the heartbeat of the 2026 offensive line. Right guard Phillip Daniels also returns from a solid first season as a starter in 2025. I also like the depth of this unit as well, with center guard Josh Padilla, tackle Ian Moore, and guard Gabe Van Sickle. I mentioned this last week. There is an expectation that Ian Moore will move into the starting lineup at left tackle, which will enable Austin Sareveld to return to his more natural position at right guard. But Moore still has some work to do in fall practices to make that possible. If he can do it, though, I think Ohio State will be as strong as any offensive line in the country on the interior. And with a run game specialist and Arthur Smith now calling the plays for Ryan Day, we could see a big step forward for the run game this season. Neither magazine did unit rankings for tight ends. Lindy's had individual player rankings for that position, and it was only a top 5. No Buckeyes made that list. Look, this is not a position where Ohio State endeavors to be among the best in the country, though this did turn out to be a pretty good room last season. Max Clare was a second-round draft pick, and Will Kazmarek was taken in the 3rd round. And I think this is going to be a decent room this season, though I probably wouldn't rank it anywhere near the top 10. And there are 3 players to watch here. Sophomore Nate Roberts is probably the headliner. Roberts was a 4-star prospect in the 2025 class out of Washington, Oklahoma, and the coaching staff loves Roberts, so much so that they gave him 160 snaps as a true freshman in a very crowded room last season. They even used him as a fullback, although unsuccessfully, and gave him a couple of carries. I think he had like 1 yard on 2 carries last year. Roberts finished 2025 with 30 yards receiving on 4 catches, which is, not bad for a reserve. The next player to watch here is Northwestern transfer Hunter Welsing, who will be entering his 7th season of college football. Welsing's career at Northwestern began in 2020. He had 3 different redshirt seasons there. Last season, Welsing caught 28 passes for 296 yards and 2 touchdown catches for the Wildcats. Those were all career highs. Finally, redshirt senior Bennett Christian will also be a factor at this position for the Buckeyes. Christian played 255 snaps last season and was underwhelming. His PFF grades across the board last season were in the 40s. They say offensive coordinator Arthur Smith loves his tight end, so I would expect to see a lot of this group on running downs. Roberts and Welsing will probably get the lion's share of the snaps here, and to me, they look like a decent, serviceable pair of tight ends for the Ohio State offense this season. Okay, let's flip over to the defense, starting with the defensive line. And here, I was pleasantly surprised to see the Buckeyes land in the top 10 of both of these publications. Athlon has the Ohio State defensive line rated number 7. Lindy's has the Buckeyes at number 8 on the defensive line. I don't think the Buckeyes make the top 10 at this position without the transfer portal, which allowed defensive tackle James Smith and edge Quay Russaw from Alabama and defensive tackle John Walker from Central Florida to join the roster. Now, I think the strength of this unit will be inside with Smith, Walker, Edric Houston, and Will Smith Jr., and I think Smith and Houston have star potential for this unit. Now, I think where this unit might be searching for some answers this season is on the edge. Kenyatta Jackson is the only real bona fide pass rusher on the roster. I talked about this on last week's pod. After Jackson, Larry Johnson and Matt Patricia will turn to 2 veteran players in Russaw and Bo Atkinson for some pass rush help, but neither of those 2 players is a sure thing. Russaw hasn't really been known for his ability to get after the quarterback in his career. His strength has been primarily against the run, only 19 pressures and 2 sacks in his career at Alabama. And his pass rush grades the last 2 seasons were in the high 50s, so, just so-so. Now, to be fair, Russaw only played 215 snaps last season because of an injury, but I think we can say at best he's an unknown as a pass rusher. Now, Bo Atkinson has 12 career sacks, more than anyone else on the roster, but only one of those was as a Buckeye. I said this last week. I think Atkinson's ceiling is probably solid rotational player. I doubt he's going to do anything to really raise the ceiling at this position. I think sophomore Zion Grady could be another player to watch at defensive end this season. Grady was a fringe top 100 player in the top 25 class, and at 6'4", 258 pounds, he certainly has the size to be an impact player here, but he's still very young and might be more on a 2027 trajectory as a full-time contributor. I think the coaching staff is also going to look to linebacker Christian Allegro, the Wisconsin transfer, to help with the pass rush. At 6'4", 241 pounds, Allegro certainly has the size to be impactful here. And in 3 seasons at Wisconsin, he graded out very well in pass rush, according to PFF. 81.2 last season and 75.1 in 2024. Allegro has 8 career sacks, and I think those numbers right there, his pass rush grades and those 8 sacks, are the reason he's in Columbus. So I think the 7 to 8 range for this defensive line is probably about right. The interior, as I said, could be really special. But I think coaching is really going to have to matter when it comes to the pass rush. As a position coach, Larry Johnson might have to do some of his best work on players like Quay Russaw, Zion Grady, and Bo Atkinson to elevate them as pass rushers this season. And Matt Patricia will likely have to get creative with his fronts and pressures to get after opposing quarterbacks this season. Unsurprisingly, neither Lindy's nor Athlon have the Ohio State linebacker room ranked in the top 10. They both have Georgia at number 1 in this position group, interestingly. Now, the Buckeyes had definitively the best linebacker duo in America last season. I don't think anyone would argue that. I mean, Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles were both top 10 NFL draft picks last month. So it's reasonable to expect a step back at this position for the Buckeyes this season. But I really like the pairing of a young rising star in Peyton Pierce, who I talked about on last week's pod, with a grizzled veteran in Wisconsin transfer Christian Allegro, who I just mentioned. Now, Pierce doesn't have the imposing size of Sonny Styles or his tantalizing athleticism, but at 6'2", 223 pounds, I wouldn't say he's undersized either. And Pierce's PFF grades from last season across the board were excellent. And in his limited snaps, 263, Pierce finished with 44 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, 1 interception, and a forced fumble and recovery. Now, to put that production into context, 10 of Ohio State's top 11 tacklers last season were starters. The only one who wasn't was Pierce. He played a fraction of the snaps and still finished 8th on the team in tackles. I think that really says something. Finally, sophomore Riley Pettijohn, the 5-star who, like Pierce, is from Texas, figures to be the top reserve at this position. Pettijohn, though, was limited in spring practices with an injury and missed the spring game. You know, it's interesting. James Laurinaitis did not dole out a lot of snaps last season. Reese and Styles were both well over 600 snaps. Pierce was next in line with 263. Then it was Pettijohn with only 77. Now, Pettijohn's classmate TJ Alford could be a factor at this position, but he's also very, very green. He played mostly special teams last season. Finally, freshman phenom Sincere Johnson, the 5-star out of Glenville High School. He could prove too good to keep off the field, but again, he's very young. I think linebacker is a very interesting position group for the Buckeyes this season. After Allegro, there's just a ton of youth in players like Pierce, Pettijohn, and Johnson, but there's also a lot of upside, a lot of talent. And I think you have one of the best position coaches in the country in James Laurinaitis running this room. Look, the Ohio State linebackers might not be a top 10 unit right now, but they could play their way into the top 10 by the end of the season. Both Lindy's and Athlon like the Ohio State secondary. Lindy's has the Ohio State secondary ranked number 6. Athlon has them at number 4. Now, the gold standard at this position this season is Notre Dame. Both magazines have the Irish secondary at number 1. Now, despite the losses of Caleb Downs, Davison Igbinosun, and Lorenzo Styles Jr. to the NFL, I love this position group for the Buckeyes. I think it'll prove to be the strength of the 2026 defense, and I would put this group up against any other unit in the country, including Notre Dame. Even more so than the defensive line, this is the unit that was most helped by the transfer portal. Incoming transfers Earl Little Jr. from FSU and Terry Moore from Duke, along with Jalen McClain, I think will give Ohio State the best trio of safeties in the country. And Dominic Kelly, the Georgia transfer, along with Devin Sanchez, the 5-star phenom, and veteran Jermaine Matthews Jr. are going to elevate the play at corner, probably to a level we've not seen at Ohio State since 2019. I think McClain and Sanchez have All-American potential, Sanchez most especially. There is a lot of playmaking and versatility in the secondary this year, and I expect Matt Patricia to lean heavily on this unit in 2026 to make plays for this defense. Finally, neither magazine has a top 10 for special teams. I know Phil Steele will have a ranking for that, though, and it'll be interesting to see where the Buckeyes fall on Steele's list after poaching Robbie Disher from Illinois to run the special teams this season. Illinois was among the country's better programs in special teams when Disher was there. The Illini finished in the top 30 of ESPN special teams efficiency metric the last 2 seasons. And the Buckeyes also added a new place kicker and Baylor transfer Connor Hawkins. Last season at Baylor, Hawkins finished 18 of 22 on his field goal tries, which included 3 of 4 on tries of 50 or more yards. That's got to be music to Ohio State fans' ears. Now, special teams, as we well know, have dogged the Buckeyes since Ryan Day took the helm, and place kicking in particular has been especially painful. Missed field goals cost the Buckeyes the 2024 Michigan game, the 2025 Big Ten title game against Indiana, and the 2022 CFP semifinal against Georgia. And mistakes in the return game in high leverage moments have also been very costly for the Buckeyes under Ryan Day. Look, I mean, special teams account for 12 to 15 plays a game, and the Buckeyes have 5 games on the regular season scheduled this year that will likely be decided in the margins. Ryan Day has to stop treating special teams as an afterthought, but I think adding Disher and Hawkins is a step in the right direction. Now, Lindy's also did individual player rankings by position. Julian Sayin is number 2 on their top 25 list of quarterbacks behind Oregon's Dante Moore. Bo Jackson is number 9 on their top 25 list of running backs. Jeremiah Smith, of course, is number 1 on their top 20 list of receivers. Finally, Austin Serveld is number 5 on their list of guards, and they acknowledge that he played left tackle last season, so Lindy seems to think Serveld will move to guard this season. That's a very popular belief. Now, Peyton Pierce was the only Buckeye defender to make any of Lindy's top player ratings. Pierce is listed at number 8 in their top 12 list of inside linebackers. Somehow, Jalen McClain did not make the top 12 list of safeties, which I think is nuts. I think by season's end, Ohio State could have multiple players among the top 10 or 12 safeties in the country, because I would put Earl Little Jr. In that group as well. Both Lindy's and Athlon's touched on the value of incoming transfers in their magazines, though Lindy's was much more thorough than Athlon's. Lindy's really like what the Buckeyes did in the transfer portal this offseason. They have the Ohio State transfer class rated number 5 behind LSU, Ole Miss, Texas, and Miami. And 4 Buckeyes made Lindy's top 75 list of transfer portal players. Defensive tackle James Smith landed at number 7. Tight end Hunter Welsing is number 58. That's a bit of a surprise. Edge Quay Russaw is number 63, and safety Earl Little Jr. is number 70. Now, Athlon has a 3-page section on top transfers, but they don't really rank the players in any particular order. James Smith and Quay Russaw are the only players mentioned in that section. But both magazines, Lindy's and Athlon, seem to agree on the impact of Smith and Russaw as transfers for the Buckeyes. Now, only 2 Buckeyes made the preseason All-American teams of both these magazines. Both Lindy's and Athlon have Jeremiah Smith on the first team and Julian Sayin on the second team, and Lindy's also has Smith as their Offensive Player of the Year. If you look at the preseason All-Big Ten teams of both publications, the Buckeyes aren't very well represented there either. Lindy's only has 1 Buckeye, Jeremiah Smith, as first-team All-Big Ten. Athlon was a little more charitable. They have Smith, Sand, Bo Jackson, and Austin Sareveld as first-team All-Big Ten. And no Buckeye defenders were recognized as first-team All-Big Ten by either magazine. That's crazy. So the only Ohio State position group that was not ranked in the top 10 of the national unit rankings of both magazines was linebacker. But only 2 Buckeyes, Smith and Sand, project as All-Americans, according to both magazines. And Lindy's thinks only 1 Buckeye, Smith, will be good enough to make the first team of his own conference. Athlon only has 4 Buckeyes making first-team All-Big Ten, and they're all on offense. Neither magazine thinks any Buckeye defenders will be good enough to make the first team of their own conference. And yet, Athlon has the Buckeyes ranked number 1 in their preseason top 25, and they predict the Buckeyes will win the CFP National Championship over Georgia. And Lindy's has the Buckeyes ranked number 3 in their preseason top 25 and making it to the CFP semifinals before losing to Texas in the Sugar Bowl. So what did we learn from this exercise today? Well, I think what we learned is that the view of the 2026 Buckeyes from both magazines backs up the growing popular notion that Ohio State is going to be a high-floor, lower-ceiling type team this season, but still very capable of winning a national championship. I touched on this in last week's pod when we looked at the star potential for the Buckeyes this season. Coaching will have to matter more this season than in 2024 and 2014 if the Buckeyes are going to win a national championship. I don't think there's any question about that. There's just less talent at the very top of the roster than those 2 teams. And the regular season schedule is way tougher than what the 2024 and 2014 teams had to face. I think this season's regular season schedule is the toughest the Buckeyes have faced in my 40-plus years as a fan, to be honest. It might be the toughest regular season schedule the Buckeyes have ever played. According to Lindy's, the Buckeyes will face 4 top 10 opponents during the regular season. Number 1, Oregon, number 2, Texas, number 5, Indiana, and number 10, USC. And 3 of those 4 games are on the road. Okay, that's going to do it for me. I will be back with another pod in the coming weeks, maybe around the time Phil Steele's magazine comes out. Until then, thanks so much for listening, and go Bucks. You've been listening to The South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast. Follow us on X at South_Stands.